showing anybody the letters. But she eventually tells Susie. I was like, thank goodness she told somebody. She had at least a half a brain cell to tell Susie. Susie's like, this is like harassment stalking, isn't it? And she's like, well, I mean, he hasn't threatened me. She's like, yeah, but he keeps sending you stuff and he keeps bothering. This is a problem, you know? So she's like, I'm going to like, you know, and she had torn up the first letter, which I thought was so idiotic. But she kept all the other ones. And Susie's like, yeah, keep them for evidence because you don't know, you're going to need it, you know? And so Lisa's like, well, I'm going to go to his office, to the gallery, and I'm going to talk to him and make him stop. And Susie's like, I don't think you need to go there by yourself. And Lisa convinced her that, you know, no, he's not going to do anything. People are around. He's not going to do anything. So she goes to his office the next day. He jumps up. He's all like, oh, my God, you finally came. I'm so happy, you know. And she's like, I'm not here for that. I'm here to tell you to stop. And he's like, what? Are you serious? Like, he was baffled. He was completely baffled by the idea that she was not coming to him to say, I want to be with you. Totally baffled. And so he was like, I can't believe you keep hurting me and just, turning everything on her. Because again, he's a nut job. So he's good at doing this stuff. He's a manipulator. And she was like, I'm just here to tell you the letters have to stop. You need to stop sending me stuff. You just need to stop. You're in a relationship. I'm in a relationship. He's like, I don't care anything about her. She's like, well, that's not my problem. I'm with someone. You need to stop. Mark pulls out this velvet box. And as soon as she sees it, she knows what it is. So he's like, I was going to propose to you when I came back from my business trip. And you just left me. And da-da-da-da. And she's like, I'm just here to tell you this shit need to stop. You need to let it go, blah, blah, blah. And she had to run up out of there. So Grayson and Lisa, they're going to go to her parents for the holiday. And then she'll stay in Port Huron. They will stay in Port Huron for the new year. And so they go to Isabel's bash. She has this end of the year bash. And Mark and Rose are there. So he traps her in a hallway. And starts filling her up. And she's so stricken with fear. It's like she can't move. She'll try and push him off, but he's a strong dude. She's not, even though she's gained some weight, she's not stronger than this dude. And so he's rubbing on her and all kind of shit. And I know you miss me and this and that. And she's like, why are you doing this? What about Rose? And he's like, I don't care anything about Rose. She doesn't mean anything. It's you. You've always been the one. And so, thankfully, when they look up, something dropped or there was a loud sound and it startled them. And when they looked up, Rose was looking at them and she was able to get away. Otherwise, I think he was going to take her. I really do. So Lisa scurries off. She goes up to Grayson. But she doesn't say anything to him because, again, she's still on that tip of, I don't want to worry him. So then Rose comes up to her, slaps her, calls her a slut, and was like, I can't believe you just tried to do that with my man, and da-da-da-da-da-da, And Mark's pissed, and he's like, Rose, stop, And it's crazy that she still felt bad for Rose because she knew when that girl gets home, she's going to have to pay for this. Making a scene in high society. Oh, he's going to be pissed. So she tells Grayson, just get me out of here. I just want to go. So they get in the car and he was like, did he touch you? And she was like, she couldn't talk. She started shaking. She was shaking, And he's like, did he touch you? And he didn't even think for a second that she was trying to seduce him or she was trying to get back involved with Mark. He knows her. But he also knows, she's terrified of this man. And this is a bigger guy, this isn't some small little dude. And so she was happy because she was thankful that he believed her. And she told him, I was terrified. She's like, I thought he would have, if she hadn't came, he would have taken it. He just would have taken it from him. And of course, that has Grayson steaming, So the night before they depart for Grayson's parents' house for that little shindig. They have dinner in the library, and Grayson asks her to marry him, and she says no. And he looks crushed, and he says, okay. And he says, do you just not want to marry me, or do you? She's like, I don't want to be married. I don't like the idea of it. It makes me feel trapped. I can't do it. She's like, I love you. I want to be with you. I don't want to be with anyone else, but I cannot do that. I'm sorry. So he still gives her the engagement ring, and he said, I still want you to have it. Just put it on, your other hand. It's still my gift to you. And she felt bad, of course. So they go to the parents' house. His sisters, they all loved her. The nieces, they loved her too. It was great. The little niece Poppy was like, are you gonna marry my Uncle Grayson? And she started looking crazy because the mom was looking at that ring, because Janet knew that was an engagement ring, because it was belonged to Grayson's grandparents. She knew, but she wasn't gonna say anything in front of everybody. You know what I mean? And so after dinner, she does have a conversation with Janet, and she asked her, he asked you to marry him and you said no. And she was like, how did you know? And she told her, because I see the ring, and that was my it was the grandparents' ring, so I knew. And she said, can I ask why? And she says, marriage scares me. It just scares me. It feels like something, like I wouldn't be able to breathe, like I would be suffocated. And she told her, that's understandable. You shouldn't do anything you don't want to do. She's like, but he loves you. And she kind of felt bad. And she's like, I'm sorry, this is a wonderful time with your family. You guys have been so amazing to me. And Janet's like, it's fine. You're still a part of the family. It doesn't matter if you get married or not. Clearly, you're the one he wants to be with. You're the one he wanted to have that ring. There's nothing wrong. We're all happy. Don't worry. So the next morning was Christmas. It was so beautiful with the family. She gave Grayson an Italian wood chess set, and he gave her specs. He's going to build an art studio for her onto the house. And he also got her a surfboard. And looking around at everyone, it did make her think of the previous Christmas when Mark had given her an anal plug. Yes, for Christmas. And he pretty much skipped it, training her, and he just plowed her all the time. And she has a conversation with Grayson that night, which I was happy for, because it was like finally she talked about what her mind had been drifting to that day with what Mark used to do to her. And it did not change the way Grayson looked at her. And that was her fear, that he would look at her differently, and he didn't, So they have a wonderful time in Port Huron. She gets back to the city, dives into her painting. She runs into Rose's former friends on the streets. She asks them about Rose. They haven't seen her. Lisa, asks Grayson, well, you think maybe we can invite Mark and Rose over for dinner? And Grayson's like, absolutely not. And he doesn't budge from that. And he shouldn't. And then afterwards, she kind of thought about it, and she was like, yeah, that is a dumb idea, because if something happens, it doesn't look right, Okay, he's sending you flowers, you were really scared, and then you invited him to your home? Like, nah, that don't make sense. So a few days later, they hear a knock on the door. It's Rose. She's got a bruise on her face. She's pale. She's wet. Apparently, he hit her after accusing her of sleeping with someone else, which she's like, there's no way that's possible, because he's always around me, and he's always keeping tabs on me, so that's not possible. So she goes to the police. They take her. Grayson takes her. Lisa's like, you can stay here with us, and Grayson's like, yeah, that's fine. Lisa felt a little envious of Rose, because she's like, you know what, Rose got out sooner than she did. He hit her one time, and Rose was like, I'm out this bitch. Like, this is it. Grayson takes Rose to her parents' home like a week later. The whole week, Lisa was doting on her, taking care of her. And at first, Rose had an attitude, which to me, bitch, you better have no attitude. If I invited you in my home and I'm treating you nice, you shouldn't have no fucking attitude. But eventually, she was nice, and they, formed a friendship. Lisa called him, telling him, I'm going to be a little late tonight, because she hadn't really been going to the studio to paint that week, because she had been taking care of Rose. And she was like also wanting to find out how the trip went. And Grayson was like, oh, it went fine, you know, she's good. So then he's on his way into the house. He hears some rustling in the bushes. The last thing he said on the phone was Mark. So he thought Mark was like punching him, but like Mark was stabbing him. And eventually he passes out. So Lisa was on the phone with him at the time. When she heard Mark, she called the police, and she heard him, you know, hey, you need to get to this address, da 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 da. So when she got there, there was already an ambulance, already police was there. And they didn't let her go with him to the hospital because they need to question her. And she tells them everything that has happened, top to bottom, even the stuff about Rose. So after they arrive, after she arrives to the hospital, she finds out, you know, Grayson's got to have surgery. Mark just did miss his heart, and the officers take her in a room. They come back and come to talk to her, and they tell her that when they went to Mark's place, he was found hanging from the ceiling. So she felt no remorse, and she thought, you know, maybe if he had showed an ounce of decency towards me, I would have felt that an ounce of remorse for him, but she didn't, and I didn't either. I was like, good riddance. He was a horrible person, and he made people's lives horrible. Bye. Later on, she calls Susie. Susie comes and stays with her for a while at the hospital, and then she takes her back to her place. But they got to go to Grayson's first to go get something to wear, and she sees his blood on the thing, and you know, it's starting to really get to her. Like, oh my God, this is my fault. You know, if he never met me, he never would have went through this. And so she has a hard time with that. And then she remembers she hadn't called the family. Then she was worried like she could never face him again because it's her fault that this happened. So she goes to see Grayson the next day, and he says the very same thing. And she says the very same thing to him. And he, of course, was like, don't you dare blame yourself for his actions. And the police, they had already contacted his family, and they were on their way. But she kept making sure that she was gone before they got there. And so every day she would try, and she'd always ask, when is your family coming? Because she wanted to be gone, because she couldn't face them. The guilt was just too much for her. So she got caught one day, and Janet was coming a little earlier and was like, hey, we're always missing you. And she knew it. And Janet's a whole psychotherapist, so she knew what was happening. So they have a conversation, and she was like, I just feel so guilty. It's my fault he's in here, and I just feel horrible. And I'm just so sorry. You all have been nothing but wonderful to me, but I feel like I brought this horrible thing into your lives. And Janet just, you know, talks to her and says, you know, listen, it is not your fault that man was crazy. And we don't blame you. We don't even think of it that way. You are still a part of this family. We love you. And thankfully, I forgot to mention this earlier, she has started going to therapy. So when she moved back to London, she did start to go to therapy, which is awesome because girl needed to talk to somebody. Then she's thinking about, after she has that conversation with Janet, she's like, you know what? He's the only person I do want to marry. So when he gets out of the hospital, she recreates the proposal scene that he did. And then he tells her no. And she goes, you know, like, damn, that hurts. Like, she thought about how he must have felt when he had to hear it from her. And he says, I don't want you doing this because you blame yourself for what happened to me. And she said, no, it's not that. It's not that at all. She's like, you're the only person I would want to marry, have children with, have a life with. I want to marry you. And so then they decide they are going to get married. And he's got to remember, he can't really do anything. He's just getting out the hospital. So she sucks him off. And then he takes a nap. It was so sweet, though. Before he took the nap, he was like, but I didn't take care of you. I'm like, now, see, he just is so much about her because he just got out the hospital and he's still concerned about her. So they leave. That was the end of that. And they're going to get married. So they get married. They have a beautiful honeymoon somewhere in Italy. And that is how the book ends. I thought this was a super cute series. I really liked it. Even, the dark stuff with it, her dealing with such heavy stuff. I just really liked it, and how she, had someone like Grayson that really did love her unconditionally. That's a beautiful thing. What did you guys think? Drop down in the comment section or the discussion board. Also, make sure you like and subscribe. I don't know next week if we're going to do like a standalone or jump back into another series. I don't know yet. It'll be a surprise. As always, thank you so much for your support and tuning in into the Always Reading Book Club.